தட்டினீங்களா?
Yeah, okay. I go live now. Yeah, going live. Going live.
Okay, I can. Okay, started already.
Okay, in the WebEx need to pin the speaker, right? The one.
ஸ்ட்ரீமிங் பண்ணும்போது ஆப்ஷன் காமிச்சிருக்குமா?
Share content lah. Yeah, share content. Two option இருந்துச்சு. One வந்து no share content, one வந்து share content.
Okay.
இப்போ இந்த
Okay, then you have to do one more thing. You have to. Okay, never mind. I can do that as a host, as a co-host.
Okay.
So I ping. I log video, Leora video for everyone.
Okay, அது எப்படி செய்யறது சொல்லுங்க?
I already logged ready. You have to do from the WebEx.
WebEx edit sharing
No. From the top middle screen, middle from the top middle pair இருக்குல்ல? You can see name, right?
Okay.
Okay, you can see their video focus.
அந்த 3 pin இல்லையா? Lock
3 pin
lock
so you have
participant to this location அதான்.
Yes, that's the
Make
one.
a
So you have to
speaker,
lock.
presenter, share, lock participant to this location lah. So we locking Leora
Yeah.
for. Okay.
Yes, I already logged Leora for everyone.
Okay, good lah.
Okay, so this video will show only her presentation and her video view lah.
Okay. That day can Silen Shafat கேட்டாரு why in the WebEx though we already locked the speaker, right? But we can still see all the other participants.
In the WebEx,
Yeah.
That's why you need to remember when you schedule WebEx.
அது செஞ்சாச்சு. I did exactly that.
And the view
on
choose
the recording
பண்ணணுமா?
preference. Yeah, exactly that. Exactly.
Okay, but we remember we changed the day.
ஆமா.
But okay. Preference la you change the view, right?
Yeah, correct. All I did lah. All I did and the setting are all done ready.
The recording focus.
Yeah. Focus, all that thing. Exactly what according to and the note from Andrea, right?
Focus on content, active speaker.
But I think Silen, it's like how you know, individual people also need to click on the layout. Otherwise,
no, Stella, you are doing recording. So recording, the person need to choose on this option, focus option.
Focus option, that means each of the people who are joining, they also have to choose Silen.
The one they have to change from their side lah. They have to do their side also. But for recording one day, you have to do.
And the recording I done ready. Exactly this. Yes. I did this. Yeah, I did this.
Okay. When you click on start live streaming, அந்த option திருப்பி வரும் வந்துச்சா?
Yes, வந்துச்சு. Again,
so
I
you
took the
choose
same.
the live. You choose the live speaker.
Yeah, live speaker. Correct.
Okay. Okay. Because
just the option வந்துச்சு.
Because the recording will be same as the and the view same as the recording on the WebEx recording.
Yes, I choose exactly that one, and the middle one.
Okay, then correct lah. I send you the WebEx. So later after the meeting, you will receive the recording.
Mm.
So let's see the view is correct or not. The camera view.
Okay,
It should
okay.
be active speaker view only.
Okay, sure.
What time start? 9 o'clock.
Actually, 9 o'clock. We need Leora to put her first screen for us to make sure the live streaming appearing correct. Okay, maybe I should get Leora come back. Hold on, Asilen. Hi,
Okay.
Leora. Hi, Leora. Are you still there? Di kana wait lang pala.
Maybe the YouTube link you share with everyone already.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Di kana wait lang. Silen?
Yes, yes, Stella.
போயிட்டாங்கன்னு தெரியல அவங்க. Hi, Leora. Are you there?
Hi, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. We need you to share the screen and on your camera because we need to test the live streaming.
Sure.
Thank
So I'm
you.
just cleaning up one of my slides still.
Okay, okay, sorry.
No, no, please. I was just shortening my slide deck a little bit because I realized it was too long. So I'll be quick.
Okay.
Oh, hi. I had sent an email and didn't get a reply. Will there be? Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go.
என்ன செய்ய சொன்னாங்க அவங்க? share your slides. That would be really great.
Okay. Oh, let me send. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to send you my slides quickly.
Yes.
I'm sorry. What's your name again? I'm sorry. Like if I email.
Marie Stella Ambrose.
I'm sorry. I'm Marie. Okay. Okay. Here you go. Let me send this super quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you see my slides? Let me move this.
Yes, I can see the slide. Can we run through the slide?
Sure.
Okay. Looks good. Okay. Let me check in live streaming as well. Celine, what can you see, Celine?
Yeah, it looks good. I can see the presenter's presentation slides with the presenter camera view only. So
Camera,
it's
only the
only
presenter.
the presenter view
Correct.
and the slide.
So Celine, okay, now I recall the Shafat's question is right in WebEx.
Mm-hmm.
In WebEx, you see, I can still see you, me, Umang, and Leora.
Oh, on the top.
Yes.
Okay. The one must check your settings, Stella. How you actually schedule this WebEx meeting?
I'm sorry, you guys. Are you speaking to me?
I think Celine, this one we can take offline, Celine. I think this
Okay,
is
okay,
the
okay,
this
okay,
one
okay.
is a WebEx setting which is beyond our technical expertise, you know, to make any changes. But most important is in live streaming, we can only see the slides and Leora's video. This is the most
Yes,
important,
yes, yes, yes.
right? Okay.
Okay, we
Okay.
can discuss offline.
Yeah. Okay, Leora, we are looking good now in both WebEx and live streaming. We got 5 minutes, so we will leave you. You can come back anytime when Tobias or Shafar is have joined in.
Okay, I'll save my camera and the audio on, so just let me know when you'd like me to start. Thank
Yeah. Do you mind to keep the slides shared? So we want the
sure.
first slides. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Good morning, Shafar.
Hi, Leora. Hi, Stella. How are you?
Hi, Shafan. Thank you again for this invitation and flexibility.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
I said thank you again for the invitation to present and your flexibility.
Thank you. No, thanks a lot for agreeing to present. This is super interesting. I skimmed over the draft, and it's a great paper to include here.
Super, thank you. I can talk a little bit about new work we're doing in Cambodia. I'll keep my slides a little bit shorter.
Morning.
Hi.
Great.
Is the office closed now in Malaysia?
Office is closed, yes.
Certain people had asked me recently.
And it's not only that office is closed. I mean, pretty much everything is closed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are almost in a complete lockdown.
Ah, no. I had the pleasure to visit the KL office a few summers ago. I got sent it. I also collect the global. I lead the global Findex data collection. And I very much enjoyed getting a seminar in person.
Great, yeah. Yeah, it's a nice place. It would be nice if we could actually go to the office and have like a normal working life, but right now COVID is just getting started here, so it's not.
How many people usually attend these seminars?
A lot of variation according to the topic and the day. Shafa, do you have the actual numbers?
So there's a wide range, and it varies from anywhere around 20 to 35
Oh,
or
nice.
40.
Yeah, so you said the invitation list goes beyond the World Bank office.
Right. Yes. And we also have a YouTube channel which live streams it, so we get a few participants from there as well.
Yeah, if anyone is working on this topic, interested in this topic in Indonesia, let me know. It's an interesting follow up to this as someone. I had an interesting opportunity to do some additional work in Indonesia. Interesting.
We right now towards the end of the season, we've not been having regular seminars, so I think we skipped 1 or 2 weeks. But usually we've been, except especially after COVID, we've been having regular weekly seminars, so it's been great with participants as well.
I guess it's easier for you to get overseas presenters in this format. Right?
Okay. I mean, we usually wait for like 2-3 minutes to give people an opportunity to come on, connect, start. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the East Asia and Pacific Chief Economist Office Seminar Series at the Research Hub in Kuala Lumpur. It's a great pleasure to have Leora Klapper with us today. Leora is a lead economist at the World Bank at DEC-RG, at the Finance and Private Sector Development Group there. And she's going to talk about a very interesting field experiment in Bangladesh on giving factory workers access to financial instruments such as bank accounts. So before Leora starts, please, the usual housekeeping. If you have any immediate questions during the talk, please let me know through the chat, and then I can interrupt Leora and ask a question. If for all other questions, please wait after she finishes, and then also let me know through the chat if you have a question. So as always, Leora will talk for about 40 minutes, and after that we have about 20 minutes for questions and discussion. So without much further ado, welcome, Leora.
Thank you. And thanks for the invitation to join you today. So I work in the research department at the intersection of research, data, and policy. And most of my ongoing academic research relates to the impact of digital payments, especially for women. I also lead the Global Findex database, which is a set of indicators on financial inclusion that we collect based on interviews with over 150,000 adults in about 145 countries around the world, including, I think, just about all East Asian countries. We're currently collecting the fourth wave of data with lots of questions on digital payments, in-store and online merchant payments, online bill payments, remittance payments, government payments, and how people get paid for their wages, which inspired the research that I'll discuss today. So it's necessary to consider this discussion now in the context of COVID-19, which has accelerated the use of digital payments. Excuse me. As physical distancing became necessary, cash became unsanitary, and traveling to make and receive payments became a health risk. So governments used digital payment platforms to quickly disperse stimulus funds. There's also a surge across Asia in digital salary disbursements. For example, according to the Bank of Bangladesh, salary disbursements as a share of total mobile money increased from 3.7% in April 2020 to 7.3% in July 2020. But there are also challenges. For example, in Colombia, mobile COVID-19 relief payments suffered from poor product design and weak digital connectivity, and digital users were 2 times more likely than cash users to complain of difficulties and delays in getting their payments. So the motivation, and this is actually a photo recently of women in Bangladesh receiving recent wage payments. So the motivation for this paper is twofold. First, there's been an expansion in account ownership motivated by the literature, a really deep and growing literature, mostly randomized controlled trials, that account ownership has real welfare implications, including greater household consumption and spending on nutritious food, education, and healthcare. Accounts can also encourage savings and give women in particular greater security, privacy, and control over their money. There's a paper I always like to cite from the Philippines, for example, where women offered an account compared to women who didn't have an account. Those women with accounts, their households are more likely to buy a washing machine, and goods that matter more to women. In other words, when women have their own account, they literally have a more comfortable seat at the table in deciding how the household budget is spent. The second motivation is the rise in financial inclusion also raises real risks of financial fraud, predatory banking services, and illicit fees. And so in this paper, we're interested to study how the use of accounts, in this case to receive electronic payroll, can build financial capability. And our paper really can help motivate global efforts to encourage electronic payments. So for example, most recently, the Gates Foundation has funded at ILO a new institute on digital wage payments. This is driven by the belief that paying, especially women, into an account has tremendous welfare benefits, which I'll discuss. And with that goal in mind, the ILO, with the encouragement of including digital wage payments as a sustainable standard for workers, has increased, efforts are increasing around the world to digitize wage payments. A lot of this, I also will mention up front, is being demand-driven, is demand by buyers. And so we're going to focus on global value chains. So these are local suppliers to the big brands, the factories that we work with supply to Nike, Marks and Spencer, H&M. And these large buyers are demanding that their suppliers pay their workers digitally. That's both for the benefit of the workers, but also for the greater transparency and fair wages and of accounting. And so, on the one hand, factories are under tremendous pressure from their buyers to digitize their wages. At the same time, international organizations are also trying to encourage this digitization as a way to expand financial inclusion among poor working adults. And so that, as I summarized the motivation, also concerns again about consumer protection, especially as workers who are, many of whom are illiterate, many are innumerate, are having accounts for the first time when these wages are being digitized, and the exploitation that's, we've documented is occurring among this sample population. And so what we want to find out is what kind of so first order priorities, simply what are the welfare benefits? Does it matter if workers get paid into an account as compared to cash? And secondly, how much learning occurs naturally as consumers start to regularly interact with this new financial technology, begin to use their account on a regular basis. Let me talk a little bit about the setting of the sample population. So we're working with 3 large garment factories. Garment factories are a critically important part of the GDP. Bangladesh's garment industry is second after China. It's about 60% of all formal sector employment, about 85% of exports. I should mention this isn't that different from Indonesia, for example, where about 7% of GDP is garment manufacturing. And as an interesting note, when I presented more generally on supply chain, I presented the global index data and talked about digitized, and spoke in Indonesia about the tremendous opportunities there are to digitize wages as a way of bringing people into the formal financial sector. It's a very salient issue to government officials because, again, of these demands from the buyers. Protecting the garment industry success in Indonesia is a high government priority, and therefore that adds support to efforts to digitize wages and build up the ecosystem and infrastructure necessary for that. So in Bangladesh, the garment manufacturing sector employs about 6 million people who at the time of our experiment were still being paid predominantly in cash. We're going to randomize workers at the factory level, and our sample is going to be about 3,000 workers with at least 6 months of tenure. And that's because turnover at these factories is very high, and so we took 6 months with the hope and expectation that the workers would be working for the tenure of our sample so that we'd be able to follow up with surveys over time. And so we introduced a simple financial technology. It's simply that workers who previously were paid in cash are now going to be paid directly into a bank account. As mentioned, the population of low-income workers, we introduce a payroll account. This is a very natural intervention. There's been rapid digitization, and this was pre-COVID, and there's already an increase in the adoption of digital payroll, which unexpected to us at the time. There's a surge in the adoption of electronic payroll during COVID, when it simply became unsafe to have workers line up to receive their wages. And we're going to measure account use and consumer learning using both survey data and administrative data. So let me dig into some details. So our population, globally, we know from global index data, about 70% of adults have an account at a bank or a mobile money service provider. In Bangladesh, there's a tremendous gender gap. Bangladesh is an example of a country that between 2014 and 2017, we saw a surge in account ownership. However, most of the benefit went to men. For a number of reasons, which I'll talk about, women were simply less likely to take up mobile money accounts, which drove a lot of the growth in account ownership by men. And so at the time, as of 2017, about 65% of men, compared to about 36% of women, had a bank account. And so there's a very large population of unbanked workers, despite the fact that they're receiving regular wage income. And wage workers tend to be, especially formal wage workers, are in the category that we call, the unbanked with huge potential. These are workers receiving a regular income. They have a need for a bank account, yet they're transacting their financial lives almost exclusively in cash. And so they must rely on cash for all of their transactions. It's very much harder to accumulate savings. Cash is easier to spend for family members to take or borrow. Also, they're borrowing only from informal sources, often at very high interest rates. And again, they don't have that resilience of credit to deal with income shocks. Let me pause for a moment to, I think is extremely interesting data from our baseline survey. And who are these workers? Give us a little more insight. So first on their financial lives, about 70% are completely unbanked. About 20% have fixed account. Apologies. And then only about 6% of workers have a current account that can really be used for regular cash management and savings. So this figure is also quite interesting. And what we want to know was if when the workers got paid at the beginning of the month, where did that money go for the first 48 hours or so? Here, first 5 days. We surveyed them typically 2 days after payday to collect this information. And so about 35% of their salaries immediately going back home to their village to support their family at home. Another quarter of their salary is going to rent. And we know that workers typically take off a day, and from the factory, this is lost production time, but workers take off time from work, they garnish their wages to run around town paying these bills, such as rent, such as school fees. About 7% of these bills, utilities, school fees are quite high, and if you don't pay them at the end of the month, your student can't stay in school that month. And loan payments about 4%. And for everything else, for the full month, the workers have about a quarter of their salary. And so they have about 25% of earnings to get through the rest of the month. Of that, and save, about 40% is used for food. About a quarter of the quarter, they tried to say, about 5% of their total salary is what these workers are trying to save on a monthly basis. I mentioned also with food, and looking at this figure, here are the opportunities. Once you pay workers into their account, their money's digital. How can they keep that money digital? And we know that digital payments is far more than a convenience, especially for women. It gives them, again, this greater privacy, security, and control over their money. I mean, if they were able to digitally pay their electric bills or school fees, it's more likely to get there on time, for example. So let me continue. So again, sample population, only about 5% of workers in our sample had ever used a bank account, about 20% used a mobile money account, about half have some sort of savings, about a quarter had some sort of formal savings, and about 50% need to borrow. That's really important in terms of the resilience. And again, we're surprised by these numbers. About 40% of workers in our sample told us that they frequently skip meals at the end of the month because they run out of money. And have other income shocks by the end of the month. And what we really saw here is there's so much effort, and especially in the academic literature, towards long-term savings goals. What these workers really need is to stretch their money to the end of the month. They need to get from one paycheck to the next without running out of money. They don't need long-term one-year savings. I mean, they also need these long-term savings. What they really need is an account. They need to support the provided by the formal financial sector to manage their money over the month, this cash management. And that's what we will see the account does have an impact on. Importantly, last bullet, about 40% of participants are illiterate, which again, both makes it harder for them to use these formal products, but it also raises flags about the importance of making sure they have the capability to use formal financial services responsibly. Here's just a figure showing we asked whether, and this was just a subjective question, are you comfortable using a bank or a mobile agent? And we divide the sample by the total sample. So even the total sample, about 66% are not comfortable. And then workers who have never had no touch points with the formal financial sector. So we call them the low experience sample. They're almost 77% report not thinking they'd be comfortable using a formal financial product. And this is really important, right? So we're dealing with a population who are illiterate, many are innumerate, who are scared and don't have the confidence or think they have the capability to use formal financial products. This is also important because there have been a number of projects led by the World Bank and others to digitize payments, mostly driven by a demand from either the government to financial inclusion or from factories themselves. And we really need to be careful. We need to make sure and follow up that the workers aren't being harmed, that the workers, when we digitize their wages, there are tremendous opportunities for benefits, but to make sure that they're able to take advantage of their account and have the capability to do so. Okay, this is an important one, social norms in Bangladesh. So first, about half of respondents says it's not acceptable for a woman to use a bank branch. They stand online to use a teller. The second important piece of information, which we learned during our study, was that in order to activate your mobile money account with an agent, you give the agent your phone number. Women in Bangladesh aren't comfortable giving their phone numbers to a strange man because they feel they'll be harassed in the future. Nearly 100% of agents, mobile money agents in Bangladesh, are men. And this has created a real barrier to women using mobile money agents, especially by themselves. Interestingly, my colleague Chavi Jimmy in DEC is running a study where they're trying to encourage, incentivize the hiring of female agents, both to provide better services to women, also as a form of female employment. So social norms plays an important role. Okay, so next talking about the technology. So these payroll accounts are really attractive for firms and their employees. So we talked about most of the, according to Findex data, about 85% of employees, workers in developing countries report receiving only cash wages. About 300 million workers who are private sector, receive a private sector wage, but don't have an account. And so these payroll accounts are currently being rolled out globally. And it's really important to remember that there's also big cost savings to the factories. And so in work that I did in Bangladesh and complementary work funded by the UNCDF Better Than Cash Alliance, we estimated that we did surveys with about 30 local factories in Bangladesh, mostly Marks and Spencer suppliers. And we estimate that each worker spends about 30 minutes off the production line every month to receive her or his wages. And that translates into the factory's production line stopping for about 1,250 hours every month. In addition, administrative staff spend about 13 minutes per worker per month preparing and dispersing wages, which represents about 480 hours of administrative staff per month. And so overall, the average cost is estimated about 44 cents per worker. For workers with 10,000 plus, factories with 10,000 plus workers, that's a lot of money monthly. In addition, digital payroll is safer for the factory as well as for the workers. There's increased transparency that can help with audits and supply chain accountability, ensures that workers receive all of their earnings without any informal payments being requested on the side. And workers have access to an account and the ability to save. When we did our launch event in Dhaka a few years ago, somebody in the audience who we did not plan stood up and said, "Please, can I join your study? I pay $4 million US every month. I live, my factory's in a rural area. I have to drive out Mack trucks to this rural area, pay for security guards, and I pay that $4 million US in 500 taka notes. That's $5 bills." He said, "I have to close my factory, but the 4 days every month to dole out cash." So clearly, there are tremendous incentives for the factories to digitize their workers, their payroll. So our field experiment, so we're going to have, importantly, we have 3 samples. And that's so we can get to both access to we're measuring both, we're controlling for access to the account and therefore testing for active use of the accounts. So let me explain. We have 3 groups. We have our control group, which continues to receive cash payments. We have a second group that simply receives a bank account or a mobile money account. And that's it. They continue to get paid in cash, but they have access to the account. And then a third group who both get account at a bank or mobile money provider, plus the direct deposit. So we're seeing the use. So we have the cash payments, we have the sample that only receives access to an account, and the sample that receives both access and use of their accounts. And so we're going to measure consumer learning in 2 ways. One, workers are able to make transactions on their own, specifically withdraw from those that receive payments into a bank account, who can withdraw the money on their own. And second, those who receive payments into a mobile money account, who can make remittance payments, send transactions by themselves without using an agent. So typically, workers would do an over-the-counter payment where they would give money to an agent, often who takes a side payment for that for their assistance, who would send the money for them. So we're seeing the movement, and again, for women especially, who are uncomfortable using mail agents and often have to find a man to go with them into the store, there's that added benefit for them to be able to send the money themselves. And so just jumping to the bottom of the screen, it's important to note the workers bear no cost. So all the fees are reimbursed. And this is also important when designing a payroll product to make sure that the bank fees aren't passed on to the workers. And secondly, we provide basic training and extended assistance. So this was also really important. One, we required and we shared the cost for an ATM machine to be installed on the factory grounds. Two, there was a bank agent on site on every payday. Bank staff at the ATM to support the workers. And so there was this ongoing support for the workers. And so there are two, let me just give a little background on these payroll accounts. The first was a bank account. We had these ATMs installed, as I mentioned. There were no fees, and they received training. And second, here's an example of the ATM. And second, mobile money accounts. These are standard accounts linked to their phone number. So we had, and here was challenging. Many of the women in our sample didn't own their own phone. Some actually came back when we offered to buy phones for the workers. Some came back, my husband won't allow me to have a phone. Also an interesting know your customer, anti-money laundering challenges. Bangladesh actually has relaxed AML/KFC for small accounts, which means that employers can open accounts for the workers with their employee records, but there isn't relaxed KYC for mobile money accounts. So it's often harder for us to open a mobile money account than it was to open a bank account. So mobile money accounts, we had to send people on mopeds back to the villages to get from the elders letters for documentation purposes. The fees were reimbursed, and again, workers received training on how to use their accounts. And here's an advertisement for the Bcash product that we used. So we did baseline. The study spanned about 2 years. We had a baseline survey, bi-monthly surveys, end-line survey. We also supplemented it with some short phone surveys. Also, really importantly, we got access to administrative data and geocoded location of all transactions. I'll also mention that there certainly was dropouts along the way of workers who left the factory, but we followed up by phone and we collected at baseline phone numbers for them, for other family members, and we did a pretty good job of tracking down most workers in our study, even those that so the attrition was manageable. So let me first show first stage results. And this is necessary for our learning by doing study. We absolutely, and so here these are just coefficient plots. So the gray bars are those that only received an account, whereas, and this is looking at 6 months after the account was introduced. As you can see, there was very little usage of those accounts. The blue bar are people who received, and this is a little bit mechanical in some cases, those who received both an account and electronic payroll. By 6 months, they start savings in the account, and the number of monthly transactions increases. So our first results, which are really exciting, which confirm some other evidence, but not in this context, is that we find a real effect of electronic payroll. We find savings more than doubles. We see impact on remittances, on consumption and shock mitigation. Workers are less likely to report skipping meals or needing to borrow at high rates at the end of the month. Interestingly, the question is, where did the increase in consumption come from? Or I'm sorry, where did the increase in savings come from? And we find that it comes from spending on impulse purchases like chips and soda, but consumption of nutritious food stays constant over time. And so we find strong evidence that electronic payroll reduces temptation spending and improves shock mitigation and increases savings, which are all good effects. Secondly, so now jumping into our results on consumer lending. So we find, we have 2 learning outcomes that we're interested in. The first is transactions without assistance. And so first, how comfortable, let me go back 1 slide. So in addition to the more general effects, we also are interested in any heterogeneous effects for women. It was great. The first time we went back to visit the factory and we debriefed a number of women. Women said to us, "My mother-in-law waited outside the gate for me on payday. Now she can't." And these women very quickly understood that being paid into an account gave them more control over their money. They were no longer coming home with a wad of cash in their pocket, which a mother-in-law or husband could take from them. They reported, more day in household budget decisions. In exercise, machine learning exercise, which I won't get into today, we show that our main results are in part driven by the marginal benefits, especially for women. So the first, going back to our two measurements of consumer learning, the first is, can they make transactions without assistance? So basically, there's an ATM on the factory premises with support. We measure the use of ATMs outside of the factory, which may be more convenient to their home. So do they have the confidence, instead of waiting to use the ATM in the factory or only using it on payday, to start using the ATMs at more convenient times and places? The second one are transactions without intermediaries. Again, these direct transactions, rather than going to a mobile money agent and standing online and having to give him her phone number. And often, as we say here, these listed fees are about 4 to 6% transaction fees to provide this service. How quickly they start making payments directly from their own phone and avoiding this risk completely. So here's a preview of the first results. We find that workers in the payroll group learned to make these transactions. 6 months after our introduction of electronic payroll, workers paid into a payroll account are 27 percentage points more likely to make withdrawals outside the firm than those who only received an account, who typically made their withdrawals only on site. We interpret these results as workers becoming more comfortable with technology. And here on the bottom, you can see our summary statistics that about 85% of workers who receive electronic payroll start using ATMs outside the factory, as opposed to less than 20% of workers who only received an account. Secondly, we're interested in the use of mobile money agents. And so workers in the payroll account group, we find, learn to make direct transactions themselves, and therefore avoiding this widespread consumer protection risk, the illicit fees I discussed. So workers in the payroll group were about 42 percentage points more likely to make transactions themselves without the help of an agent, as compared to workers who only received a mobile money account. And again, here is just a way of sidestepping common consumer financial protection risk. So just to show it as illustrate the results. So first we can look at within, so who's making direct versus indirect transactions, those who received direct electronic payroll versus those who only received an account. We find about 62% of those receiving their wages into a mobile money account sending transactions directly, as compared to only 20% who don't, and the flip here for indirect transactions. And so only about in the account only group, only around 20% of transactions are direct. We also find at the end line that the payroll, so 2 years later, the payroll accounts group is 42 percentage points less likely to make transactions than the account only group. And what's important to note here is, one of counter interpretation could just be that remittances fell, and their remittances increased, and that's why they're making more transactions, or total remittances remain constant. So even controlling for constant remittances, we still see a greater use of direct remittance payments. So now we have a interesting extension. So one of the questions is, to what extent does having a payroll account make savvier? Does having a payroll account make you a savvier financial customer? And so to do this, we do an audit study, which is another way of saying we sent actors. We trained actors to pose as garment workers, and we gave them 2 scripts. One is a high, relatively financially savvy script, and one a low knowledge, financial knowledge script. And we sent them into mobile agents in different neighborhoods. In some neighborhoods around factories that had electronic payroll, and some agents around factories that paid in cash. And we control for the agent penetration. And the question is, how often is there a difference in agents overcharging these actors, these auditors around factories that pay electronic payroll versus those that don't? In other words, are there spillover effects to the whole community? And we find that so what is the motivation for the studies? Again, spend one more slide on this. This question around can workers learn to avoid illicit fees? As I mentioned, are there spillover effects to the whole community of digitizing payroll? And we're going to find out the answer. So we sent. They were randomly assigned to either read the high knowledge or low knowledge script. Randomly assigned to different neighborhoods at different payroll account penetration. And we're going to find out how often they overcharge. And so what we find here, so low adoption area are neighborhoods around factories that pay wages in cash, versus high adoption areas are those neighborhoods surrounding factories that pay electronically. And we control for differences in the neighborhoods for account of agent penetration. So we find in high adoption areas, customers are 16% less likely to be overcharged, to charge additional illicit fees. That really suggests that there's learning at scale, reduces these what we call the information asymmetries. It makes for savvier financial customers, which spills over to the community. In addition, the low script increases that actors posing as less informed customers increases the illicit fees by 39%, and low area, the conditional low skills adds even an additional 12%. And so overall, giving workers the opportunity to become higher skilled customers, in addition to sort of suggestive of general equilibrium, community effects, seem all to be positive in building financial savvier customers who are less vulnerable to predatory pricing. So to conclude, we introduce a simple financial technology, these payroll accounts, and the financially inexperienced population. As I mentioned, most workers had no financial experience using accounts before our intervention. We're interested in an experimental design that varies both access and usage by providing people with only accounts as compared to accounts with the use of payroll, electronic payroll. Those that use their accounts more extensively means also for use, also to receive payments, learn to use their account without assistance, and learn to avoid the exploitation, the predatory fees of commission-motivated agents. We also, in the machine learning exercise, we find that the benefits are largest for women, for those with less financial experience at the baseline. And again, we should target our consumer protection efforts towards these groups, and suggestive evidence of the externalities for the whole community. And before I finish, I'll just mention for a moment some additional work that we've been doing. We're working now with the Better Works program, which is a joint IFC-ILO program, where we replicated, not to this extent without the randomized control trial, but we replicated our work, basic work in Bangladesh, in Cambodia. So in Cambodia, we'll be launching the project later this month, the report later this month. We surveyed about 30 factories on their costs of payments similar to Bangladesh to estimate the monetized cost of cash payroll versus digital. And we interviewed about 400 workers about their current financial situation. So in Cambodia, there's been, it's much slower than Bangladesh, but there has been digital payroll adoption to both bank accounts and mobile money accounts. So the two products that you're familiar with, primarily led by Acleda and by Wing. And And one really interesting difference there, which I'll mention, just how context-specific these products are. So in Bangladesh, an interesting a notable point of our results was that, and to go back to our findings around the impact on savings and borrowing, the welfare effects. So we find that workers paid into a bank account are more likely to use their accounts to save, but they're not more likely to send direct payments. So a bank account is primarily used for savings, whereas workers paid into a mobile money account are more likely to adopt sending remittance payments directly without the use of an agent. They typically don't use their mobile money account to save. And that's, I think, more generally suggestive that they're not perfect substitutes, bank accounts and mobile money accounts, the importance of interoperability, and broader financial services. However, in Cambodia, that's not what we find. We find that workers paid into a bank account indeed use their accounts to save, not to make payments, but workers paid into a mobile money account typically don't use their accounts to save or to send remittances. And the reason there is that the account can only be accessed using an app. So it's not a text-based product like in Bangladesh. It requires an app which workers don't want to install on their phone. And very few workers actually use this app. A combination of it taking too much of their storage, they complain about data fees, and just complain that it's too complicated to use an app. Which really highlights the importance of designing the right products for this market segment. And with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leora. Fascinating stuff. Very nice paper. It has a lot of, it's a lot of material. It has a lot of parts, I think. Compared to the actual paper you sent us, one aspect you didn't go into very much is that you had these two treatments, right? You had just a bank account, and then you had bank account with with payroll deposit. And you had fairly different results for these two. So why do you think that just providing workers with a bank account, but without the payroll, didn't really have the results you were maybe expecting? It seems that, you have some results for the payroll. You have some results for just a bank account, and it seems that they actually make kind of the same amount of deposits into it. But other than that, I like the effect of an order of magnitude difference.
Yeah, so actually and I apologize for not being clear. So all the results I discussed are comparing those second and third treatment groups, those with an account versus those that receive electronic payroll. We don't compare to our main results don't use the cash, compared to the cash sample, because that's a slightly unfair comparison, right? So just having an account, so what we want to disentangle is the impact of getting an account, which there's tremendous, canon of earlier literature showing the benefits of account ownership versus this, the marginal benefits of also having electronic payroll. And so we think that's what's really driving our results. For example, around, I really like these the first set of results just on savings and consumption. There's a literature suggestive of the nudge effect, that when you're paid your wages suggesting when you pay your wages into an account, it's easier to leave a little left over in your account than would be when you have cash to leave a little bit in your pocket, where it's more vulnerable to impulse spending and borrowing from family members. So that's one explanation. And around the shock mitigation, again, something we believe that when it's harder to mentally, psychologically, to take your cash wages and deposit it into your account is harder than leaving a little money in your account to withdraw during the month. So it helps you stretch your money better because you have a safe place out of the home to keep the money.
Okay, so that was a comparison. So, but what I found was striking in the results you presented in the paper, the more detailed ones, is that it seems that just giving a bank account has zero effect on actual deposits from the payroll, right? So you get the payroll, you have the payroll and the bank account, and these people make the same amount of deposit if people were just giving the bank account. That they, I mean, that means the implication would be there's zero effect of giving people a bank account, and they actually deposit part of their bi-weekly or monthly wages there. That all the money that they deposit is independent of the treatment is just money they have flowing around from someplace else.
Exactly. So here is that picture I think you're referring to from the paper. So box A is showing, in fact, as you're suggesting, that people who only receive the account do make deposits into their account almost on a monthly basis, 0.5. Whereas, the other metrics, for example, withdrawals, the balance that's kept, transactions, certainly even the number of transactions is very significantly different. What seems to be going on in the deposits, which is interesting, it appears to be that people are depositing a little bit of perhaps even their household savings. So if they're the only member of their household with an account, the amount tends to be very small. So we've seen interesting pattern is that the first month after getting the account, those without payroll deposit a larger amount. Maybe that was money they were keeping under the mattress, and then future months, it stops by about the third or fourth month. We start seeing a significant difference by the fifth month. But for the first couple of months, they deposit a little bit of money on a monthly basis. So I think it's a good point. I mean, it does suggest maybe a nascent need for more affordable and convenient financial services that people can use for deposits on a regular basis.
Okay, then as always, we open it up to the floor. Are there any questions from the audience for Leora?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Leora, for a very interesting presentation. I think this is definitely very impactful, especially in less developed and middle-income countries. I just have two questions about spillovers. First one is, usually in these types of studies, spillovers basically contaminate results, but I think it would be an interesting outcome because you started off with the lack of trust in formal accounts or banking system on part of payroll, on part of employees. Do you see any signs? Maybe you touched upon that and missed it, but do you see any signs of spillover of account information or account openings to your control group as well? Because that would be a desirable outcome in this case to some extent. And that's what the government and these employers are trying to do. And secondly would be, and again, I think I may have missed it, but you, I think, Saito talked about them becoming tech savvy and investment savvy as well. So I wanted to ask if this spillovers into other economic decisions, such as prepaid mobile SIM and their other account, or their better usage of it, in the sense that, for example, mobile companies have these offers and other things, and just because now they're dealing with more numbers, they are able to make better decisions about taking useful offers and spending less on their mobile and other such high frequency activities. So those are my two spillover related questions. Thank you.
No, thank you. Those are both excellent questions. For the first one, we weren't able to get that data. So proprietary data on account openings. But the second one is actually a really good question. We should look into that. So thanks for that suggestion. I mean, Bangladesh I'm trying to think. I mean, it's a relatively more simple market, but the question of taking advantage of mobile phone offerings is a nice suggestion. Thank you.
And then, like another question I would have was regarding the externalities you found on overcharging from moneylenders. And I mean, you interpret this result as an externality of these customers, they become more savvy, and therefore these lenders know they cannot overcharge as much as they used to. I was wondering if this may just be a demand response, that just because people have bank accounts, they have less need for these lenders. And as a result, these lenders essentially use a lot of business. And you could just think of overcharging as being a price response, right? So if you have like a shift in the demand function, you have less demand. The price for the
That's a good question.
goes down.
So to clarify, it's not the lenders, it's the to send money home to their family, they're giving their money to the agent to send it for them through an over-the-counter transaction. So that's where the agent, add tax on, a couple of illicit fees to the cost. And so it'd be cheaper if they sent it themselves from their phone rather than use the agent and have to pay them these illicit fees to send it over the counter. So that's the money that they're saving. And as I put up in the slide, we do check for that. So the number of remittance payments and the amount sent stays constant over the sample and from the baseline to the end line. So we don't think that's what's going on. It does seem that they're sending the same amount of transactions, same amount, but just sending it themselves rather than using these agents.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
Just one. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I have one clarifying the question. So in the beginning, you mentioned the procedure to open a bank account for just conventional traditional bank and versus mobile bank account. And you mentioned it's more difficult to a more complicated procedure for mobile bank account. So I wonder how, so what's gonna be the role of this complicated procedure for making the mobile bank account more available to people. So if this is the actual practical the barrier, then even if the result is good, then in the beginning it will be difficult to access to this the mobile account. So what do you think the role of this in terms of making this intervention more practical? And the second question is, so maybe I missed this part. So what was the just socioeconomic status between control and treatment similar, or was there any difference that could lead to this different result?
Okay, thanks for those questions. So to answer the second one first, and I'm sorry I didn't put it up, it's in the paper, but we do we run regressions and do the tests, and there's no bias in our randomized in the randomization. So we randomize, I think, conditional on gender and position, and so the randomization worked, and we don't see any biases between in any of the socioeconomic variables between the control and the treatment. In regard to your first question, that's a good question. So at the time of our study, it was right after Bangladesh had been put on a U.S. gray list for AML KFC. It was after, you may recall, there was a break into the New York Fed through a Bangladeshi account. So there were extremely strict regulations around account openings. And so at the time, the Bank of Bangladesh was revising their KYC requirements on a somewhat regular basis. So the bank accounts were more stable because they were opened effectively by they were the worker's own account, but the employer had opened them for them. Whereas the mobile money accounts had every few months workers had to show additional documents or new documents to maintain their account, which really just highlights, that yet another way that governments should support the growth of the mobile money market and making them more accessible, especially to lower income, less savvy customers is by having consistent, transparent regulation, which makes it easier to open and maintain an account.
Thank you.
Thank you. So more questions? Okay. If there are no more questions, I think we'll leave it here. So thanks a lot, Leora. It was a great talk. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And to the audience, before you leave, I will now post the usual link to our survey. Please fill out this very short 10-second survey for our seminar series.
Thank you. I hope to visit you in person sometime.
I hope so too, yeah, that at some point we will actually be able to travel again, meet each other, go to the office, these kinds of things, and just not know your colleagues over by virtual means. Okay,
thank you for the great questions. You're welcome.
Thanks a lot, Leora. It was great.
Have a great day. Bye.
You too, have a good evening, and everyone here in East Asia, have a good day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Stella, you can stop streaming and stop live streaming. Sorry, stop live streaming and stop recording.
Silen?
Yes, Stella. Okay, stop the recording and stop live streaming. Can you stop recording, stop live streaming?
Silen, okay.
Okay, then live streaming.